This is an SM Media production.
Hi folks, and welcome to the latest episode of the Celtic Report right here on SM Media. I'm Scotland Pye. It's a pleasure as always to be your host. I'm delighted to be joined by my guest this week. It's a pleasure to welcome on Rory Bryce.
All right, Scott, how's it going, mate? Thanks very much for having me on. It's an absolute pleasure.
Pleasure's mine, mate. Regarding podcasts, I'll let everyone in a little secret. We arranged the guest to come on maybe 4 or 5 days before the game's even kicked off because I'm quite a forward thinking planner. So, Rory, I'll apologise in advance for you being the one to take the hit for this performance because there's really no many positives we're going to be talking about here.
No, not at all. So I think I maybe missed the last 10 minutes of the game, so I managed to catch the first half, and to be honest, that's all that I really need to talk about. There wasn't much difference in the second half from what I was told, but I did manage to see bits of it, and then when it got to about the 8th minute, yeah, I just yeah, that was me.
Usually,
So
that's the first time Celtic have lost at home in the league since 2021, the famous St Mirren game, which kind of derailed the 10 in a row push, I would say, completely. But you have to obviously look at Celtic games when they win and go, right, where's the positives to take? What can be improved on? Games like yesterday, last week, the Kilmarnock game, you can take positives in the first half performance, but the thing that rang the alarm bells was how bad they were second half. Feyenoord
yes,
play really well in some cases. Lagerbielke comes on. We'll get into that in a minute. But you can't. There's nothing going through my head because all it is just negative thoughts regarding Celtic at the moment, and that from where we'll talk about this today. Actually, I was talking to a couple of people at the cup final, and they were saying the exact same thing. They said, "How 3 months ago would you have envisioned this?" And it's true.
Mhm.
It's true because Celtic were 7 points clear. Rangers were an absolute shambles, and now you can put a lot of credit. Rangers are motoring. There's no doubt about that. We can look at Rangers across the city and say Rangers are gathering steam. They've won a cup. The gap's closed in the league. They've obviously got the momentum. But Celtic should not be in this position. Celtic should not be where they are right now. And we'll get into
No.
that. We'll get into the what and why. But right now, from where Celtic were in the middle of September to now, I just think it's a mile away.
No, you're absolutely right, and it is a mile away. And just to go back to what you said there about Rangers, you really feel like the momentum has swung in their favour, and it feels like that it's been going that way for quite some time. Now, obviously, we're still 5 points ahead of them in the league, but they have 2 games in hand. And I think what a lot of people, it maybe hasn't hit them just yet, is that they have one of their games in hand this midweek on Wednesday, so they can cut the gap to 2. If if they beat us on the 30th, then they've overtaken us and they've still got a game in hand. We're in a bad position, and I don't think enough people have actually had that sink in yet or realised that it's not just going to be the case that they could go a couple of points above us or a point above or whatever it is. If they beat us in the 30th, then we're in trouble. They're they're in a great run of form at the moment. That's going to keep continuing. They're only going to keep getting better under Clement as he gets more time to implement his style of play. And like you said, Kilmarnock, yeah, I mean, the first half was okay. The second half, the drop off was terrifying. It was
Frightening
stark.
when you watch it back. Frightening, like the
It,
massive drop off.
absolutely. And yesterday, I seen someone say actually that it didn't look like the players were playing for Brendan Rodgers anymore. And someone actually said that, just off the cuff, they didn't have any inside info or anything like that, but they said that his comments about Lagerbielke and then the report that came out that said he was available for sale probably the night before the game, I think it was.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
That's just pissed a lot of players off, and obviously we'll never know for sure, but I could see something in it, and I I didn't know what we were trying to do tomorrow yesterday. The team selection was bizarre. I feel like the team selections have been bizarre for a while, to be honest. And I I don't see where we're going. And considering in the summer when Ange Postecoglou left the club, it seemed like we had the foundations of something that was going to be great.
Yeah.
I now don't see where we're going anywhere but backwards.
Well, let's look at the team news because I think it was more eye catching who didn't make the squad than who did. Regarding the lineup, I think probably with the exception of Carter Vickers, it was probably what we all thought it would be. I think we're all surprised Carter Vickers would come back. But in terms of the sub, now the bench, I think alarm bells ring with the bench for me immediately. And I want to get into that overall when we look at kind of structure of the kind of depth and squad and things like that. But Mitchell Frame, I thought was really good when he came on and Wednesday night. Sorry, Lagerbielke scored the winning goal in the Champions League to give you the first Champions League win in 15 games. Now, does that change the fact that does that eliminate anything that's been said beforehand? No, but for them not to be anywhere near the squad when you look at the performance in Sunday and go, right, these two guys have come in. Lagerbielke I thought was quite good when he came on. Welsh, even for example, Welsh straight in ahead of him in the starting lineup, things like that. Greg Taylor has not been playing well and didn't play well on Saturday. So why is Mitchell Frame nowhere near the squad? And then obviously the substitution later on, which is probably one of the most baffling things I've seen for Brendan Rodgers. And there's not many baffling things I've seen from Brendan Rodgers in his time at Celtic in both spells. That to me speaks to a bigger problem. That these two guys have come on in a Champions League game and they're now nowhere near the squad. And you look at Nawrocki being in and out all the time. Yang's now completely out the picture. It smells. It does. It just smells bad.
It does. I completely agree with you. It's so worrying. Now, cards on the table, obviously through my own podcast, which isn't a Celtic one, it's a football history one. I don't talk about Celtic much, and it's really just my circle of friends and a couple of other forums that I'm on that people will know that I have been pretty negative about Brendan Rodgers since he came in. To be honest, I didn't want him to come back. Different reasons for that. I won't go into that too much because I don't want to be too overly negative on him. But he hasn't shown me anything personally yet that he can make decisions like that, or he's not shown me that he deserves the credit in the bank to do that. Because I took one look at the team sheet yesterday and I was like, right, Yang's not even in the picture. Michael Johnson's starting again, and by the way, that was his worst performance yesterday. Since he's been back in the team, he was terrible. He was absolutely abysmal. Forrest was on the bench again, which I don't understand. James Forrest has been a fantastic servant to the club, but whenever he's on the field now, I get angry watching him because he's just so far past it. We shouldn't be playing him anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many places you can start with it. Nawrocki not being in the squad whatsoever is baffling to me. Liam Scales has been fantastic.
I understand it as well. I understand it if Nawrocki is injured, but he's been in the squad, then doesn't make an appearance, then comes back into the bench. I mean, it's just there's a few things that you mentioned. Obviously, Liam Scales, and I'll let you kind of have the floor again. I think Liam Scales is. I've mentioned about Liam Scales in the past. I want to get your opinion on this. Liam Scales is well suited to that Celtic side. He's the left sided centre back. He's good with the ball at his feet. Nawrocki and Lagerbielke, I'm not sure, are that type of player. And I think the problem with the centre back position is that Starfelt and Carter Vickers did complement each other really well. And I think Scales is the best person to complement Carter Vickers. And I think the manager sees that. But that was probably Scales' poorest game yesterday as well.
Yeah, it was. Now, I completely agree with what you're saying. I think Scales does complement Carter Vickers quite well. But from what we saw of Nawrocki, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, he looked like the natural replacement to Starfelt, and he would be the one starting alongside Carter Vickers. The fact that he's not been given a chance since coming back from injury, and you know, without him naming any names, Rodgers basically targeted the players that are coming back from injury and said they weren't doing well enough in training. And I don't believe him. I'm sorry. I can't believe it. It's crazy to me that we've got this amount and these number of players on the bench that we spent X amount of money from. We haven't kept a clean sheet in God knows how long now across all competitions. Yeah, and Greg Taylor. I've not even got started on Greg Taylor. I think quite a few fans expected a regression when Postecoglou left because he wouldn't be playing inverted anymore, which is fair enough. But the fact that Rodgers has consisted with playing him when he is so far off it at the moment, so far off it, it's such a detriment to the squad. And don't get me wrong, I really wanted Bernabei to do well, and I don't think he's good enough to be back up to Taylor. And we'll talk about Bernabei in a moment. But the fact that Mitchell Frame wasn't anywhere near the squad yesterday, and I know he was playing for the B team, but the fact that he wasn't called up to the first team, yeah, I don't know what's going on at the moment, mate. I really don't.
Nah, I think it's valid. Obviously, we'll get into the game as a whole. Celtic probably have a lot of the early pressure, but 15 minutes in, and we've seen this goal several times this season. But I want to just pick up on something here that I think the alarm bells ring for me again. When you're defending your box, now Joe Hart is not the most, like, he's not the best goalkeeper in terms of commanding his box. We know that, but the most dangerous man on that park in terms of goal scoring that's not called Kyogo was Lauren Shankland.
Correct.
For him to be able to peel away from, I would give Scales, I'd probably say Scales and Taylor are marking the same man. I would probably say Scales should be the one looking at Shankland here. But the way that Shankland peels off, and he's got enough time to really kind of compose himself for the header, put the amount of power in it that he knows is going to put it in the net, because he knows that Joe Hart's problem is not saving it if it's on target. There's so much wrong with this corner. It's a good header, don't get me wrong, but the fact that Shankland is able to just peel away with no hesitation and just put it away like that, it's a horrendous goal for a Celtic perspective.
It is, and this is the thing. I don't even think he peeled away that much, because I was watching the highlight back today, and I think it's Alistair Johnson and Scales are doubling up on one of the other Hearts players, and Scales is sort of close to Shankland. Shankland notices that they're both caught up with the same guy, and sort of just takes a step back. There isn't any effort involved in it.
No, there isn't.
And he's there for a free header. You're absolutely spot on, Scott. It was a horrendous goal to concede from a Celtic perspective. That should not be happening.
The second goal it's one of those, like, again, it's a brilliant hit for Kingsley, don't get me wrong, but again, I think Hart's slightly gambles that he's going to his right when we can all see he's going to the left. 2-0 down now. The first goal's a disgrace. The second goal's a free kick that, again, you really can't do much about. But I just felt watching the game back, and I've watched it back again today, the atmosphere in the place is just completely sucked from that point. And
it's gone. That's
what you brought up, an interesting point I wanted to touch on here, and I think we need to kind of touch on Rodgers as a whole, because I did have these concerns when I heard Brendan Rodgers was getting the job. If the results turned under Brendan Rodgers the second time, there would be a section of the fan base, not all of them, but people who still don't forgive him for leaving the first time. Instead of looking at the horrendous recruitment that we've touched on for weeks, that I want to touch on again, looking at the board who, when it came to the AGM, I thought were just lazy in their answers.
Yeah,
the crowd would go for Rodgers because a large section of them had to find it in them to forgive him for leaving the first time. So it wouldn't take long for results to change their opinion again. This is the problem, because Brendan Rodgers, when you don't have that goodwill, whether it's fair or not, the crowd are going to turn on Rodgers. And if we're on here in 2 weeks and Rangers have beaten Celtic, it will be pretty bad for Brendan Rodgers. It's bad just now, maybe not his fault, but it could get tenfold by then.
Yeah,
and that's the problem.
Could get a lot worse.
That's the problem he's got, and that's the problem I think he knows, because he could have made a statement on Saturday with the substitutions. The substitutions were horrendous, but I'll get into that in a minute. But the first half, there was literally nothing to talk about from a Celtic perspective. And I'm not one for booing. When I think when it gets to the booing stage, I think at times it's a little bit for the cameras as such. I think it's a little bit. I think it's some. Are you actually booing what you're supposed to be booing about? People are
Mhm.
talking about the atmosphere. I think that has little to no relevance on field performances. I think that's just another thing that people want to talk about and discuss. But I think there's no relevance to the football side of it. But the first half, the booing at half time, there was just a toxic atmosphere. It was, and
Mhm.
whether it's fair or not, I don't know. But that half time was really bad. When Santa's getting it in the neck, you know it's bad.
Yeah, I felt really bad because I saw the photos of the Santa, and he looked absolutely gutted. So it was a bit of a shame, but you're right, and I think I agree with what you're saying on Rodgers, and this leads into a wider point and something that I've been considering for a while. There's really, really bad vibes around the club at the moment. There's a really, really rotten feeling to it and a really bad element to it. And it all started, I think, with Rodgers being hired. Now, aside from the fact I didn't want him back, I've not been completely like, you know, going in on him saying that he should be sacked whenever we've lost it. Well, in some cases I have, but it's more been this is what I said would happen if he came back,
Yeah,
and whatever. But we went from in May winning the treble. Probably the club was the most united that it had been in a very long time.
I would go along with that.
Probably with the exception of the bad run of results that we'd had under Ange then. But looking back now, knowing that he was leaving, you can kind of look at it that way. But it's mostly United that the club have been in a very long time. So the board then appoint a man who is an incredibly polarising figure amongst the support. So that causes issues. The Green Brigade are banned, and there's still no communication between them and the board about when they're going to be allowed back in, which is horrific. And now you had that yesterday, where the atmosphere was the worst that it's been at
But
Celtic Park.
do you think the player? Do you think the team aren't performing though because the Green Brigade are not in? Because I don't buy that.
No, no, no. I don't. I'm not. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that there's always things that are kind of combining to create an atmosphere that's incredibly toxic, and I
Yeah,
think the players react to that and respond to it. I'm not saying it's solely the Green Brigade, but there's not been much of an atmosphere at Parkhead recently because they've not been there, and that's fair enough. But without, whenever Celtic normally go down, there's always a big cheer, come on, respond, and the main fan groups are always there, kind of getting the rest of the crowd G'd up, and we've not had that for a while. It's a little thing, and again, it's not the sole reason that we're performing the way that we are, but I do think the players see that, and it feeds down into them. And probably that's the worst atmosphere that there's been at Celtic Park, I would say, probably since the Copenhagen game, way back in 2019, or the Cluj game, or when they beat us 2-1 at the New Year game in 2019 as well. And obviously none of us were in the stadiums for the COVID season, but yeah, it's not good. It's not good. And I think at this point in time, obviously I have my biases and my opinions. I think it's only going one way at the moment.
Well, half time comes and Rodgers makes three changes. Now I can see Alistair Johnson. I thought he had a really probably his poorest game in a Celtic shirt. I think the first 45 minutes. I thought he was woeful.
Yep.
Ralston comes in. I thought Ralston did well when he came on. Turnbull, who I thought him and Palmer. We'll get into Palmer because I want to kind of touch on a couple of things that I think there's way too much reliance on him for creative output. Turnbull
Agreed.
comes off. O comes in. And Mikey Johnson, who you were right, was way off it. And I've said many times, the fact that he's even near the squad is an alarm bell to me because he shouldn't be. He shouldn't be nowhere near. He's not good enough. He's not Celtic level. And I think everybody's came to that conclusion. Maeda comes on. Wee Buzz, obviously getting him back for injury. But those three subs, I can understand the logic behind them. But after that, Palmer, who I've said for a few weeks, I really like the potential of Lewis Palmer. I think there's a lot to improve on. Is he Jota? No. Can he become Jota? We'll see how that goes. But I have been impressed with him. But I think there's way too much reliance on him to be the focal point of the attack because I thought O'Reilly was off it yesterday, McGregor was off it yesterday. You can have off days, especially when you're a really good player. But Palmer yesterday, because there was way too much pressure on him, you could see that he was erratic. You could see he looked knackered when he went off in the 62nd minute. But I think that is another problem because everybody will say yesterday Palmer was horrific. It wasn't his best performance, but you can't tell me there was anybody out there that was getting the ball as much as Lewis Palmer, and they were all for him to be the output, and that's a problem as well because you can't have one player with all that pressure. You cannot give the one player. You can't just expect him to be the man to make something happen, and that's another problem.
I can't remember who it was that put this up, but at the end of the first half, Kyogo had only had 4 touches of the ball or something like that. That's a huge problem. Kyogo, we know, is a goal scorer. We know that he likes to run off the shoulder of other players and kind of break the lines that way. And he clearly doesn't suit Brendan Rodgers' system. I think that's now very evident. So that's one player that whose creativity we just don't have anymore. Mikey Johnson, I don't mean to be harsh, but his creativity is often doing wee step overs and then trying to take his man on, which he often fails to do.
Yeah.
David Turnbull, I was a big advocate of David Turnbull when we first signed him. I think he's a cracking player and I think he could suit some kind of Celtic system, but that's now 3 that he's really failed to find his feet in. And it's unfortunate because I think he's a cracking player, but Palmer and Turnbull in the same squad, in the same starting 11, you just know for a fact they're going to be trying to take shots from all over the place. And I think that was one of the frustrating things yesterday, is that whenever Palmer got the ball yesterday, his decision making was really, really, really poor, and that he kept trying to go for goal. And Xander Clark just kept picking him up time after time. He would have been loving life yesterday. Xander Clark he had absolutely nothing to do, bar a few attempts on goal. O'Reilly again he can be creative. We've seen over the last few games though that's starting to dip off, and there's reasons for it, and we'll come on to talk about that later, no doubt, just because of the tactics and stuff like that. Outside, I mean, those are some of our most creative players, and they're not doing anything, and it's a huge worry.
There's a sub in the 62nd minute that I think kind of sums up this game and sums up the situation at Celtic right now. Lewis Palmer comes off. He looked exhausted.
Yep.
Bernabei comes on.
Yes.
I don't know. 9 minutes later, he takes off Taylor and brings on Forrest. So I don't know what on earth that. Why not just do the double sub then? I don't get what was Bernabei meant to do. What does it say about, like, for example, like looking at Kwon doesn't even get a minute. Not that Kwon really made a difference. Bernardo, you can trust in the Champions League, doesn't put him in a game like that. There's literally nothing else.
No, I know. Yeah, and it was bizarre when obviously looking back on it now, when Forrest came on and Taylor came off, you're like, right, okay, fair enough. But at the time, I was like, Bernabei coming on for Palmer, I was like, this is one very desperate throw the dice from Rodgers here, and putting all that pressure on a player who's already very much maligned by the Celtic support. He's got a lot of detractors. Bernabei, putting the pressure on him to go out and make something happen in a position that he's not played in for a very long time was incredible. It was an incredible decision. I have no idea why he thought that was going to work or what he would get out of it. Didn't have a good game yesterday, Bernabei, at all. For obvious reasons, I don't think he can necessarily be blamed. And then obviously, Taylor comes off and James Forrest comes on. But as you said there, Bernardo, Kwon sat on the bench. The fact that Kwon was on the bench, I just it's weird, Scott. It all kind of leads to the same question that a lot of people have been asking, and they don't know what's going on at the moment. You've got Rodgers coming out in the media saying that some players need to work harder in training, and then the centre half that scores your running goal to give us our first Champions League win at home in 10 years, saying, "Oh yeah, he's great, he's coming on really well," and he's not even on the bench on Saturday. And then, I don't know what to make of it, mate. I don't know what to make of it. It's really, really bizarre at the moment, and you get the feeling that things are starting to look a little bit like they did in 2019 when Dembele left, when there was a lot of accusations being thrown around, and it's worrying. It's worrying.
I want to touch on something that I want to get your thoughts on. Celtic B played at the same time as Celtic did, and on Saturday, Mitchell Frame was playing for the B team. Rocco Vata was playing for the B team as well. Rocco Vata is somebody I've been really keen to see, because when, for example, is anybody going to tell me that Bernabe in that position is not as, do you know what I mean? Rocco Vata couldn't be a better option at that point than Bernabe with 30 minutes to go. It's weird, and it's weird. And that is something that I think is a big problem, is the fact that Celtic had Celtic 22 shots to Hearts 5 shots in target. But I cannot remember in that second half a clear-cut chance of Celtic scoring. I cannot. No. Off the top of my head, nothing rings a bell now. That another problem as well is that Hearts did not have to play well at all to win that game.
No, they didn't. They didn't. And that's the thing. And this is what I wanted to touch on as regards tactics, is that teams know how to play against Brendan Rodgers' style of football. It's a style of football that is becoming less and less prominent because it's less and less effective. Mm-hmm. Fair enough, in 2016, he won an invincible treble with it, which was an incredible achievement at the time. I think what a lot of fans forget is that in the following 2 seasons, we dropped an awful lot of points through draws. Obviously, Rodgers then leaves in March 2019, around that time.
Yep.
And Lennon comes in. But the football and the style of football we were playing was grim. I remember it, and it still is. And you saw it yesterday, because all Hearts had to do was crowd the box, and our players almost formed this kind of horseshoe around the box, and the ball was just going in those directions. And another thing on that note, I have never seen a team so ineffective from set pieces as us.
Yeah, I was going to touch on
it's incredible, and that's been, to be fair, that's been something that's been around since Rodgers' first spell as well. You know, it's been an ongoing issue. I personally, Scott, I don't know where we go from here, because every game now feels like a cup final.
Yeah, and it's weird because you look at the start of the season, going to Ibrox, winning, going to Pittodrie, winning, going to Tynecastle. I thought probably the best performance this season was Tynecastle, to be honest.
Yeah.
To have that head start, to put yourself in that position, and now to be really poor. But again, Kilmarnock away in the cup, I didn't feel Celtic were scoring.
No.
I didn't see Celtic coming back last Sunday. Apart from the O'Reilly goal against Motherwell, where they scored the 1-0. It was a really poor game, if you remember. Mm-hmm. Motherwell equalise, and then O'Reilly scores a late winner. And I think if it wasn't for Matt O'Reilly, I'll be honest and say that I think Matt O'Reilly is kind of papered over the cracks a wee bit, because he's been so influential. And you can put it that you can look at injuries and go, right, injuries. Hatate would be playing yesterday, absolutely. Abada would be playing yesterday, absolutely. But you said something that's interesting. Hatate, yes, has been off and on with injuries, but you can't rely on that. That yesterday is 8 out of the 11 players are starters, with the exception of probably Turnbull, maybe Scales and Mikey Johnson. That's probably your best team. Apart from, you can't tell me those 3 players are such a drop off from what you had originally. That is alarming.
That's the thing, and it all comes back to the tactics for me, because we have more than enough quality in our squad with injuries to be beating Kilmarnock away from home and to be beating Hearts at home. That's what it comes back to. Hearts are until yesterday, Hearts were on an abysmal run of form. In fact, people were saying if Naismith didn't win yesterday or put in a good performance, then he'd be out the door. So that's bought him some time. But we should have been beating them regardless. I mean, any of the players that started for us yesterday, and even some of the players on our bench, would have walked into that Hearts starting 11.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's what the issue is for me as well. It's just we're very easy to play against when we don't look like scoring. I think the fans know after about 20 minutes that it's only going one way.
Yeah, and it got to the end of the game yesterday, and we've all seen the video, the photos and the videos of I won't say fighting because it wasn't fighting. It was more tittle tattle. I think's the word we'll go with for the crowd. Now the Celtic board before Ange Postecoglou came in, you probably, as a Celtic board member, couldn't have walked down the Gerrardale Street. You couldn't.
No.
You easily couldn't. But now, under Ange, because the recruitment was so good under Ange, the board got a pass. They did, because everything was rosy. Now that's changed, and the board are in the spotlight again. Now, I've been on record in saying the performance in the AGM I thought was abysmal. It was totally
I totally agree
shambolic.
with you.
And when now, there are a section of the Celtic support who, as long as Celtic are beating Rangers, they're happy. But to be in fourth place in Europe, in the Champions League again, out before Christmas, there comes a point where you have to really assess the situation here and go, domestically, Celtic are doing well, but you in the continental stage, we're off it. Now you're looking at that going, domestically, they're struggling.
Yeah.
What? So how... And I'm not one for saying that Rodgers is 100% to blame. I think he takes his share of the blame for yesterday and the performances recently. But recruitment in the summer as well, to lose Jota, to lose Starfelt, and I think with the exception of Palmer, I think the recruitment in the summer's just looked a mess, in all honesty.
It has been a mess. And you know what the thing is, Scott, as well, is that I don't think there's a lot of people who are quite apprehensive to say it as well, because at the end of the day, we've still not seen a lot of the players, and that's kind of telling in itself that maybe Rodgers just doesn't fancy them. But as I've said, I don't trust his judgment, to be honest. But a lot of people were saying, well, these guys were signed for Ange, and they would have been identified for Ange, and that's all well and good, and I understand that. But at the end of the day, that's how Ange Postecoglou likes his recruitment setup to be. He likes to pick up players that are kind of undervalued
and it worked.
It worked because that's the type of manager that he is. However, I still think you should be using the resources that you have available to you. I still think you should at least be trying to integrate these players into the team, because if not, as we saw, it's just been a gargantuan waste of money. The players that were bought that have now come back from injury aren't being given a chance. So the Rocky Lagerbielke, for whatever reason, that entire situation is really, really baffling. Yang is better than Mikey Johnson. Yes, he had a really poor performance away to St Johnstone, but he's better than Mikey Johnson. And I know that for a fact. He's still very young. We're very, very quick to write off players and to just want them bombed out the team completely, and it's always something that I've disagreed with. They still deserve a chance, but yeah, I think next summer the recruitment setup that we have needs to have a huge shake-up. And to be fair, I've wanted the board to be replaced for a very, very long time. This is going back to probably Lennon's first spell. But I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. It's more what on my mind is, if Rodgers is to go, what happens next? Because that's also a big worry. But obviously that's not happened yet, so I don't want to go into conjecture about that. But it might not be too far away.
I think that's the thing. I think because it's 2 defeats in a row, because there is this unrest towards Rodgers in the back of a lot of people's minds, regardless of Brendan Rodgers could win 10 out of 10, could have won every single game in Europe in the league, could have had a faultless run. The minute a result turned, it would have been, we knew this would happen, we didn't want him to begin with. And it's natural. People just cannot forgive. And I understand why, don't necessarily agree with it, but what not baffles me, but what kind of gets through my mind with Brendan Rodgers is we've been down this road before with recruitment. I will always go back to the day, I can't remember what radio station it was, but he did an interview not long after the John McGinn pursuit, which was, we knew how that went down, and he used the phrase, if I don't get backed the way that I feel I deserve to be backed, it will be terminado. That was the first time that Celtic recruitment was put under pressure, and it was because of Brendan Rodgers coming out and being vocal about it.
Yeah.
So when Brendan Rodgers then took the job and then comes out and says, the recruitment's in a far better place than it was. And go back and look when he gets announced. He says
no,
that.
he did.
To now be in this position where we're looking at recruitment in the exact same way we were 5-6 years ago, I wonder what Brendan Rodgers was thinking. Because it's a big thing going through my head of, is Brendan Rodgers went in there, been sold a pack of lies, been told, right, everything's changed at the club. Look at the past manager. We went and backed him. We went and got players that he knew. Everything was rosy. You're going to have this treble winning squad to work with. All we need to do is get a few players in that can tidy it up. We then sell your biggest player for 25 million. Don't really replace him. Don't really replace Starfelt like for like either. And now you're looking at it going, I don't know what's going. I don't know if he's looking at that going, because at his press conference to me yesterday, he looked a completely broken man.
Oh, well, what was it he said yesterday? I'm not surprised about the dip in results I'm not surprised at the results because I've noticed a dip or something. But it's like, well, it's your job to change that.
Yeah,
it's your job to get a response. But I know what you're saying, and I think it's an interesting one because there was rumours doing the rounds at the beginning of the week, and for all intents and purposes, they were very, very loose rumours, right? Not WhatsApp rumours, but there were rumours coming from a few people who said that Rodgers had actually turned down the job initially, and then he was offered more money. And that apparently Peter Lawwell had went out to meet with him himself. Now there's a huge amount to unpack there, and there's a huge amount of worry in that. But I think even if he was sold a pack of lies, he knew that he was walking into one of the easiest jobs in football in the world and one of the easiest pay packets in the world, and he would have known that he could have got it. But I agree with you. I don't if he unless he had been sold a pack of lies, then I don't know why he did come back. But I just think at the time there were other better options out there. It didn't really look like we were pursuing them. The board said that they wanted Rodgers back because he brought a level of consistency, but people already pointed out at the time that was far from the truth because the style of play was completely different.
Style of play is not too different, but different enough. That's what I keep saying.
Yeah, it's different enough. Like the philosophy of Rodgers as a manager is different enough, and I don't know, mate. I don't know. It's really, really puzzling, and we were kind of hoping in the back of my mind anyway. I was saying, right, if we can get through this season, win at least 2 of the 3 trophies, then I'll be happy. And I think he'll deserve a second chance, regardless of how I feel about his tactics or anything like that. But I did not think that in December I'd be sitting here having this conversation with you, because whether a lot of fans might not want to believe it or not, we are in a really bad spot at the moment. And the way Rangers are playing, if we don't win on the 30th, we're going to be facing an uphill battle.
Yeah, and that kind of leads on to the final point. Looking at January, and we spoke about January a wee bit, we know there's a massive need for a striker because of the potential Asian Cup, where you've got 3 forwards potentially going to that. You've also got the situation of, again, squad upgrades that badly need done. Do you pump a fortune into this January window and go, right, which is it's usually a terrible window to make big transfers because
it's a bad window.
Panic. A lot of clubs panic. A lot of clubs don't want to sell. A lot of clubs know that they can wait to the summer. They don't have to immediately sell. It's not a good situation now. Celtic spent 15 million in the summer. Celtic have probably spent less than they brought in.
Mm-hmm.
But they're going to have to massively look at January and go, can we get away with just a slow approach in January? Because as you say, if that result in the 30th doesn't go Celtic's way, even if it's a draw, I don't think suits Celtic either. At the present moment, I don't think a draw suits Celtic. They will be baying for blood, not just for Rodgers. The board will get it as well. Recruitment, the nepotism in recruitment, something I spoke about a lot. I don't think it's going well at the moment. I think Lawwell's not a popular man. The fact his son's in charge of recruitment as well, it's only just going to fester further and further. January's huge. But I'm not sure that Celtic are going to jump the gun and go, right, here's 15 million, go and get a striker, goalkeeper, left back, which we should have got in the summer. I don't think that's going to happen.
No, I don't think it's going to happen. And this isn't going to be a popular opinion by any means, and I understand why. it will all depend on what happens in the 30th, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And again, that this is me talking very much from a perspective of if I was in charge of Celtic, I wish. But if we lose on the 30th, then I think Rodgers should be sacked. I think if that happens in January, I think we put things in place to try and get players that we badly need, and then we set our sights to the summer. I think if we don't win on the 30th, I think we may as well just be looking towards the summer, because as you say, January's a horrendous window. It will be very clear at that point, I think, that things aren't going well at the club, that we probably won't have the same manager in at the end of the season that we do at that time. And therefore I don't see the point in us spending over inflated money for players that might be suiting an interim manager. That's if we don't win on the 30th. If we do, and we go into the January window looking at players, I think we're going to need to be really shrewd. I think we're going to need to be very, very shrewd. I don't think we'll bring a goalkeeper in for the sole fact that there's not an awful lot of them out there at the moment, and if they are, they're going to be even more expensive because it's January. I think we should be looking to give Seagrist a run of games. I've not got a clue what's happening there, to be honest. Again, Joe Hart must have one of the easiest jobs in the country. We need a creative midfielder. And this is the thing, this is what I'm saying. The squad is incredibly bloated. But we very evident we need players to come in and start delivering those results. There's another player we've not even mentioned, Odin Holm.
Yeah.
I mean, Holmes
looked squad yesterday either.
Holmes looked pretty fine when he's came on. Like, these are all young guys; they need game time to develop, and they've looked good. But again, nowhere near the squad. Back onto the transfer window, I think we need to shift some of the dead weight. I think it's clear that Kobayashi is going to be going. Bernabe probably as well. McCarthy, absolutely. McCarthy has to. One of the goalkeepers has to go, because we need to bring another one in. Probably Scott Bain, but it will likely be Seagrist, I'd imagine. Haksabanovic, another really, really strange situation. I really liked Haksabanovic. I thought it was quite unfair what ended up happening to him, but when you spit the dummy light out like that on social media, then you can kind of understand that that's going to happen. I don't think he covered himself in glory with that, but I think it was quite unfair what happened to him regardless. I mean, I'm pouring through my mind, because those are the obvious ones, but then you've still got a very bloated squad. You've still got youth players who are looking to come through. What can we do? Nat Phillips will hopefully be going back down the road. Fair enough. I've never been a big fan of Stephen Welsh personally, so maybe he'll end up getting shipped out as well. I don't know. I would probably rather it was Scales, but he looks like he's going to be starting every game until the end of the season at the moment, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Which means that it's probably going to be the case that the players that we brought in summer are going to have to go. And that's just going to add to this growing feeling and growing look that things are really bad around the club. Because shipping players back out that you signed in the summer is en masse, as how we think it might go, is a very, very damning indictment of your recruitment policy and how things have been.
Yeah, no, certainly. And I think it's something that is obviously going to fester over the next few days and weeks as we kind of build up towards the 30th as well. But there's games in between then. There's big games coming up between now and then. Livingston and Saturday, then obviously Boxing Day. There's a lot to unpack in the next few weeks. But this is the last Celtic Report before Christmas. So I want to thank my guest on today's show, Rory Bryce. Rory, it's been a pleasure, mate. Sorry it's not been a great topic to talk about, but it's been a pleasure to talk to you.
No, thank you so much for having me on, mate. Happy to do it any time, and hopefully next time it will be under much happier circumstances.
Yeah, hopefully so. Yeah, thank you very much, everyone who's tuned in. Have a good Christmas, folks. We'll be back after the Boxing Day show. We'll have a post-match reaction after Livingston on Saturday, so stay tuned for that. But thank you very much, folks. See you soon.